Hi guys, my name is Nick Broughton and I am a Random Fish. If you're a Random Fish too, hit that subscribe button and let's be Random Fishes together, shall we? Now, today's video is going to be a little bit different. I'm sort of recording myself and I'm going to put it to some visuals so you won't have to look at my ugly face for the entirety of the video. So, I wanted to talk about a comic book character on Tuesdays, whereas on Thursdays I'll do one about a movie review, and then the Saturday or possibly the Friday I will do something about Star Wars, possibly through the same sort of format. So, the comic book character I wanted to look at today was Beta Ray Bill. Now, Beta Ray Bill, for those of you who don't know, is essentially in Marvel Comics an exact equal to Thor, even so much so that he has his own hammer. His hammer is called Stormbreaker. It's almost exactly the same as Mjolnir. It's created out of dwarf star alloy, much as Mjolnir was. Forged in the heart of a dying star, as it's referred to. Which is a brilliant concept for making a hammer, by the way. If nothing else, congratulations to just Norse mythology and Marvel Comics in general, just for creating that concept. It's brilliant. And I love the fact that it's called Stormbreaker as well. You know, Thor's hammer, is Mjolnir. It's spelt bizarre. It's from Norse legend. It's like this amazing thing that's this mystical hammer that has these unknown properties. And, it's exact equal in every single direction. What do we call this thing? Let's call it Stormbreaker. Because, it sounds like a handle you give yourself on a really bad, very bad version of watching Warhammer or something. But anyway, back to Beta Ray Bill. Beta Ray Bill's... I'm going to go through his actual character history, not so much to his publication history, because it's really kind of thrown all over the place. Although, to be absolutely honest, he turns up in Thor in sort of like the 300 comics sort of era, so 340 I think it is, or a little bit before that. But of course, these characters have all got these various things going on. So the actual characters themselves, Nick Fury at the time in S.H.I.E.L.D. discovers an alien fleet that's passing by, and Fury sends Thor in to investigate. Thor then discovers, much to his own surprise, a ship called Shuttlebug, or Scuttlebug, if you will, floating around in space. He then also discovers Beta Ray Bill. The two of them fight, ultimately to a standstill, and Bill even manages to separate Thor from Mjolnir, which he picks up and can use fairly quickly and fairly effectively, I might add. Which is kind of cool. It's something that not only is Thor incredibly, taken aback by, but, starts to wonder whether he was the only one ever worthy enough to wield, his hammer, which of course becomes stable for his hammer and the use of it much later on in the comics. For example, Red Hulk ends up being able to wield Mjolnir because Thor is holding onto the hammer, onto the sort of the strap of the hammer, which is supposed to be one of the most ridiculous things ever, and yet it still works as a concept because I still thoroughly enjoy the concept of Red Hulk, possibly one of the most dangerous Hulks ever, and yes, I am including the original Hulk in that equation, as well as World War Hulk in that equation, I should say, wielding something as powerful as Mjolnir, which is really quite brilliant. Obviously, upon discovering what he can do, Thor ends up discovering, and Thor ends up discovering that this guy is worthy. He's been protecting his people, called the Corbinites, from destruction, which is why he was on Scuttlebug and why there's an alien fleet in the first place, because they're being transported to another planet, because their planet's been destroyed, as it turns out, by one of Thor and Odin's biggest enemies, Surtur, the fire demon. Not only does Thor end up pleading his case to Odin and trying to get Odin to lend a hand to Bill and everything else, Odin ends up creating the new hammer for him. It's equal in all of that, and all of that sort of thing. And basically, Beta Ray Bill ends up joining with the Asgardians to stop Surtur and destroy him. Beta Ray Bill ends up working with multiple sort of characters within this concept, including, but not limited to, the Thor Corps, one of the most recent iterations, which was done on Battle World, which is a fantastic series. If you got a few minutes, I suggest checking it out. It's amazing. You've also got various stories that he's involved in. He's part of various various teams across the Marvel universe. And he ends up dealing with all these sorts of things. He ends up fighting off against one of Galactus's new heralds when he discovers that his people is he discovers that he's been sent back to his people during Ragnarok on Asgard, when Thor ends up teleporting him to the dark reaches of space to save his people. Not only does he fight Galactus's herald, but it turns out that there's like an alpha ray, another Corbinite that was transformed, because that's kind of what Beta Ray Bill was. He was the Corbinite's version of a super soldier. So he ends up fighting the other version of their super soldier, except he's got a bit more messed up in the mind. It's a bit like Captain America versus Red Skull in the first Avenger film. The two of them are so alike in so many ways, and yet have absolutely the most painful things ever. But during all of this, and he ends up crashing on Earth, going back to Earth, and ends up destroying, and ends up going to Earth, and ends up having a new body, which is kind of weird, I think, if nothing else. He ends up, one of the teams he ends up joining is Omega Flight. Not something I'm very aware of, that team. Not very long, I don't think. Not a very long sort of story. He ends up trying to fight. He ends up going to hunt down and fight Galactus, which is a very bad idea. There are very few characters in the Marvel Universe that can actually defeat Galactus, and while I do think Thor might have just held his own against the World Eater, Beta Ray Bill he's equal to Thor in a lot of ways, but he is not Thor. Especially not now, at this point in the timeline. And for those of you who don't automatically know everything, those of you who aren't very sort of comic book savvy, Thor's story currently has two versions of Thor. A worthy Thor, which is wielding Mjolnir, and the Thor that we all know from the comics, from basic comics and everything else. He now wields an axe. He has a metal arm, which was subsequently lost. That can be explained in another video at another time. And just all of that, and he goes around trying to discover things, or trying to, take on new villains and all that sort of thing. Thor is a very, very interesting character to sort of talk about, but unfortunately, I wanted to talk about Beta Ray Bill purely because he is the forgotten one. He's just as powerful as Thor. He has a hammer that is equal to Mjolnir in every single way, and yet somehow he ends up with not a lot of respect, not a lot of talk about him. No one really seems to want to sort of discuss Beta Ray Bill, which I think is kind of sad, because he's been involved in various animated shows as well. He was part of Earth's Mightiest Heroes, Avengers Earth's Mightiest Heroes. Granted, that show didn't run for very long. It ran for approximately 2 seasons, but it was still well done. He, superhero squad show, while not the most amazing, kind of the Marvel version of Teen Titans Go, I feel. Very much more kid-orientated than, more intelligent programming that could have been done with it, which wasn't done very well. Which is kind of weird. But, and all this sort of thing. But he was involved in that show as well. Obviously, these, Earth's Mightiest Heroes and Superhero Squad show, they dealt with his origin. They dealt with, Thor finding him, Bill using Mjolnir to fight against Thor and, nearly defeating him. Odin having to try and craft a new hammer for this guy. All this stuff sort of happening in and out of nowhere. And one of my favourite things, actually, about Beta Ray Bill now is there's an animated film based off of one of the big Marvel comics called Planet Hulk. Planet Hulk, for those of you who don't know, is a story where Hulk is taken to another planet by what's called the Illuminati of Earth, which is not the Illuminati that we have in this quote unquote real world, where it's a shadow organization trying to rule the world. These are literally, it consists of Doctor Strange, Iron Man, Mr. Fantastic, and Black Bolt. Between those four, they help end approximately world-ending events before they start, and they try to sort of keep the world in balance and try to keep the world at peace. They end up sending the Hulk into space, basically feeling that he was too dangerous to be kept on Earth, and they couldn't wait for his permission to stuff him in a spaceship and send him out. So they just did it of their own backs, which is kind of a dick move, but that's explored much later in its sequel to Planet Hulk, which I will not ruin here. I will talk about that some other time, because talking about the Hulk is just an amazing thing for me. But anyway, back to the point I was making. The animated film is based off of that comic book, focusing mainly on the fights that's had in the comics, and and most of the story is sort of based, but it sort of focuses more on the fights. In the comic, they fight off. The Hulk ends up in a one-on-one fight with the Silver Surfer. In the comics, he turns up. If you know the Silver Surfer, flies around. He's on a surfboard. He's a cosmic powered being. He's a herald of Galactus. He holds the power cosmic. All this sort of thing. He's basically become that character. And in the Gladiator arena in the comics, he has turned his surfboard into a shield / spear type thing, almost like how Captain America sort of has his shield as a defensive and yet an offensive measure. It's the same thing for Silver Surfer and the surfboard. It's a shield, but it's also a defensive power. It's also an offensive power, I should say. But in the film, it's not him that they end up facing, it's Beta Ray Bill. And it's discovered through a flashback from one of the Warbound in the comics, Korg, that in one of the very first Thor issues, Korg's species came to Earth to attempt to learn more about the planet and then attempt to basically conquer it, possibly. And they end up discovering Thor, who ends up beating the crud out of them. They think they have him captured, they think they have him pinned down. Beta Ray Bill then turns up and starts helping him out. In the comics, obviously, it's just Thor that drives them off the planet, and that's that. And they're not mentioned again until Planet Hulk. There's no link between the two of them in the comics. But in the film, he makes a mission to sort of talk about it, because it's this rather interesting thing where they're linking that story to this one, because they actually are making an effort to connect it now, whereas it was still very much common knowledge, but it was never fully confirmed within the comic book pages. But in this, it really was. It was 100%, 100% confirmed. If it was confirmed in the comics, I do apologise. I never saw that. If it was that, then I do apologise. But obviously, within that concept, Silver Surfer was the character that he was, and Beta Ray Bill in this was just fantastic, and it's brilliant to sort of see. He looks so bizarre, and yet he looks so brilliant. He really does, and I think that's what makes him a brilliant character, all in all. I think, because he's so different and so unique, I think that's what sort of sets him apart from other secondary characters. Yes, he is a secondary character within the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and within the Marvel Comic Universe, I'm sorry. But I don't think that that's a bad thing. I think too much of him, people would get bored of him quite quickly. I think they're using him just the right amount within comics. If you really want to see something about Beta Ray Bill, I would recommend Beta Ray Bill Stormbreaker, the actual story, where he ends up... there's the whole Ragnarok thing going on with Thor and everything else in Galactus' Herald. I also recommend watching Planet Hulk. I recommend watching the episodes of Avengers Earth's Mightiest Heroes. You'll have to get the whole season. It's not that bad. It's an amazing watch. It's a great thing to sort of look at. I just recommend you sort of look up what you can about Beta Ray Bill. He's a character that, yes, he should stay a secondary character. That does not mean he shouldn't get the recognition he deserves. So like I said at the beginning of the video, my name is Nick Braunton. I am a Random Fish. If you are a Random Fish too, please hit that subscribe button. Absolutely would love it. And you know what? Random Fish out.